Is the Antichrist come into a body at birth, and has he always known? That's a question by Katie. I don't think it's a stupid question, Katie. I think that's a very interesting question. Now, I cannot fully answer that for you, but I can give you my perspective. Okay, so I want you to understand that this is not "thus says God." Right? This is here's Doug's opinion, based on the scriptures that I find in the text, and I will gladly share those with you to the best of my ability. Okay, so let's um, let's share my screen again, so you guys can take a look at these things, and then you can get a sense of whether that makes sense or not. Okay, so let's just put it here in both of these languages here. Let's go to Second Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And it says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition." Okay, so this is what we call the Antichrist, the beast. Uh, he's called Big Mouth, the boastful guy. All right, there's a lot of different epithets for him. And it says that who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God. All right, so this is where we read in the book of Revelation that he's going to exalt himself above uh, those in heaven. We read about this in the book of Daniel, that he will exalt above himself above all that is above the other gods, the gods that his fathers did not know, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so Paul is taking that same idea, and he says, "Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped," and here's the key, "so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." I think that's very powerful, and I would suggest that what Paul is getting at here is that this guy is not just a talker, right? He's not just, all talk and no action. He has action to back that up, right? He's got action to back that up. Now, again, some of the ideas that Paul is drawing from says that he shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor any God, for he shall exalt himself above them all. Now, why is this guy so amazing? Well, let's go to Revelation chapter 13. Okay, Revelation chapter 13, we learn something about this individual. And it says, "I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name." So we saw this exact same thing happening in Revelation chapter 12, where in Revelation chapter 12, there was a sign in heaven. Another sign appeared in heaven. "Behold, a great fiery dragon having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his head." All right, well, we are not surprised by that, because it says, "Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority." And so when they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" I would suggest that this guy is the real deal. But he is not born that way, because it says again here, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now, let's turn over to Luke chapter 4 really quick. "Then the devil, taking him up on a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time," obviously speaking to Jesus. "And the devil said to him, All this authority I will give you, and their glory, for this has been delivered me, and I give it to whomever I wish. Therefore, if you will worship before me, all will be yours." All right, so now the situation is a little bit different, of course, because Jesus is better than the Antichrist, clearly. But Satan wasn't making this up. He wasn't lying in this case. Jesus didn't say, "What are you talking about, Satan? You don't have all this stuff. It doesn't belong to you." Jesus is very complicit. He doesn't seem to disagree with him at all. In fact, we have other scriptures that suggest that same thing. My point then is that there comes a day in the life of this Antichrist fellow when he is given the authority, he's given the crown and the power of Satan. And it's at that point that there seems to be some kind of a melding together that's going to go on between them. Now, in the movie project that I'm working on, what I actually suggest is that through some kind of a quantum machine, that there will be a portal, some kind of a phase. I call it a quantum field phase inducer. All right, and it's gonna allow two phases of our realm, our dimension, and the dimension that it's above us, the spiritual dimension. It will allow those to exist in a shared phase space, also known as superposition. If we're talking about quantum superposition, that these two things can exist at the same time, and it creates a quantum entanglement between these two. I'm not making that up, by the way. Quantum entanglement's a real thing. So now we have this connection, this quantum connection between Therion, between the beast, right? Between the beast and Satan, and that they somehow meld together. And I would suggest that is why Satan actually gives him his authority, his throne, and his power. Because the last I checked, Satan was not too big on giving those things away, right? He really likes to keep those for himself. And so this has to be a very, very special kind of individual for Satan to do that. And so when Paul says that he's going to show himself as God, showing himself that he is God, he's not just all talk, but he is able to back that up with power. And I would, again, would suggest that this happens sometime later in his life. Does not happen when he's just being born. So what I'm getting at then is that he does become a Nephilim, if you will. He becomes a hybrid, but not from birth. He becomes a hybrid later in his life. We do have a clue. Again, it's not a super strong clue, but we do have in Genesis chapter 11, we have reference, chapter 10, my bad. So in chapter 10, we have reference to Nimrod, and it says he began to be a mighty one on the earth. Okay, so the language there is not super clear, but we could possibly infer from the language that it says Hechel lihyot gibor. Okay, so he began to be a gibor. Now again, a gibor. David had giborim. He had mighty men in his service. Gibor could potentially be a reference looking back to Genesis chapter 6, where we have the mention of a gibor in Genesis 6:4. It says, those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. So in that context, who are these mighty men? Well, they were Nephilim on the earth in those days. There were giants on the earth in those days. And also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. So that's the implication that I see, is that the Antichrist figure will become a Gibor. He will become a Nephilim. He doesn't start that way, and then he kind of melds with Satan in some way, and they seem to have some kind of a shared identity from then on, because we don't really see Satan doing things by himself. He's always doing it through the vehicle of the Antichrist. So that's all I got on that one. But great question. Okay, so it wasn't a stupid question at all. All right.